Hi, welcome to 123stitch.com. Today we're going to talk about Biscornus. What's a Biscornu? A Biscornu is this cute little 8-sided pillow that's usually cinched in the middle with a button, and it makes this cute little shape. You can use them as pin cushions, you can use them as decorative items, you can have stitching on both sides of it, you can have stitching on just one side of it. You can use different color fabric on the front and the back. There's all kinds of fun things you can do with them. The problem is they look really hard to do, don't they? They look hard to stitch together, but they're really not. I stayed away from these for years because I just thought that that's too hard. That's more than I want to do. I even watched a bunch of videos, still looks scary. Then I actually sat down, took it step by step, figured it out, figured some tips and tricks to make it easier, and I'm going to share them with you today. So they're nothing to be afraid of. We're going to figure them out together, and you're going to love making these as well. Before we get started though, please don't forget to click on that subscribe button down below so you don't miss any of our videos. And everything I mentioned will be listed as a link in the description. Okay, the first thing we need when stitching our design is our stitch piece. In this case, I am using Candy Cane Biscornu by the Blue Flower. There's two versions of the pattern. I'm doing the one that has just one color of floss for the main design, and that is, in this case, I'm using Threadworks variegated floss, and then a line of DMC back stitching all the way around. There's a whole bunch of Biscornu patterns out there you can choose from, or if you want, you can just use any square pattern. Something to keep in mind is you want to use the same count of fabric on the top and the bottom, and then your design size has to be exactly the same. The inner portion doesn't matter as much, but that outer back stitch line has to have the same number of stitches on both pieces. So in this case, the design told me to use 2 strands of floss, 2 back stitch all the way around the design. And I did that on both pieces. And I would recommend always back stitching with 2 strands just so that it has that extra strength when you're stitching through it to put it together. So any design you want. And then I usually trim about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch all the way around. The next thing you need is some fusible interfacing. I like to cover the back side of my design to lock the threads in place anytime I'm stuffing the design. It just keeps it a little neater, keeps the threads in place. It doesn't, nothing gets pulled out. So we're going to show you how to do that. You're going to need to whip stitch the edges together the same color of floss you used on the back stitching. You're going to need 2 buttons to go on the top and the bottom. In this case, I've chosen a little peppermint button from Just Another Button Company. You're going to need a thread, matching thread for the buttons to sew the buttons on. I like to use a sewing thread to give it a little bit more strength. I'll use 2 strands. Seems a little bit stronger to me than using DMC, but DMC may work as well. I think it depends on how thick your Biscornu is. You're actually pulling those center pieces together, so you're going to want to make sure it's strong enough. And then you'll want a needle that is sharp, small enough to go through your buttonholes and sharp to go through the pillow. So you will want a chenille or sewing needle sharp point. When you're whip stitching these sides together, it's up to you whether you use your regular cross stitch tapestry blunt tip needle or you want to use a sharper chenille sewing needle. It's whatever helps you catch just the threads and not the fabric fibers. Sometimes I use the sharper one, sometimes I use the regular one. It may depend on the fabric, depends on just what you're stitching. Have them both handy though. The other thing you need is to stuff the design, you need polyester fiber fill. So always have that handy. And I think that's all the supplies we need. Next, I'm going to talk to you about the interfacing, how we put it on, and then we can get started stitching. Okay, we've got our stitch piece. I have trimmed it to 1/4 to 1/2 inch all the way around outside of the edge there. A couple things I did before before I put the interfacing on is I marked the center of each side of my designs, and I did that with a little stitch. You can do that while you're back stitching, just count halfway through and put that little stitch in. That helps us keep the design centered. If you don't want to use a stitch or you've already gone through the whole thing, you can use a pin, you can use a little marker, doesn't really matter what, as long as it's in this outside edge that will be covered, you won't see it at all. I also like to put a mark in the very center of my design for button placement. If your design has a wide open area in the center like mine does, it helps me to find the center by having that little mark there. It's not necessary, but it will be covered by a button, and I find that it helps a lot rather than trying to just eyeball it when you're putting the button on. So for the interfacing, that is optional, but I do like to do it to cover the stitch portion so nothing comes apart when I'm stuffing it. You're not going to put it on the whole piece of fabric. You're going to put it just on the section inside that stitched line. When we are stitching it together, we're doing it from the back stitching line, and we don't want interfacing to be in the way. It'd be a little bulkier to turn under. So you just measure on the inside, and then you iron your interfacing on so it looks like this. Then next, we turn the ends under. We don't need to get an iron to press them. We just turn it under so that back stitch line is right at the top, and we do a finger press. We just press it down. Don't worry about the corners. Those will be dealt with as we stitch it. And it doesn't have to be exact either. This just does help you when you're stitching it together to have that pressed down a little bit. Do that on all four sides on both pieces. And then we can start stitching. Go and this side. All right, I am going to thread my needle with the double strand of floss that matches the back stitching line. I am using one long strand of floss that I have folded in half and looped on one end. I'm going to thread my needle with the loop method. I'm going to thread the looped end. I find that's easiest. There we go. We're going to pull that through so the looped end is longer than the tail end. Okay, now we're going to pick a corner of either the top or the bottom piece. Doesn't matter which one. I'm going to pick the top piece here. I'm going to turn the point under for this corner, and then I'm going to fold the ends in. So we're going to create this little mitered corner. Let me trim these loose threads up a little bit. So fold that end under. Then fold these pieces in. That gives us that nice corner. And what I like to do, it is hard to start this sometimes. So what I like to do is to start my needle in the two folds of the corner to hold it in place to help me get started. Now, I am stitching just those loose pieces of fabric, nothing on the right side of the fabric. I'm just putting a couple stitches in here to keep that little corner in place for me. There we go. Now I've got a nice corner. And what I want to do next is take my needle and go in the, just catching the thread at the corner of my design. We're going to take a corner of the, let me do it this direction. Here we go. I'm going to take the corner of our design. I've marked that with that little stitch, and I'm going to put my needle under just the thread on that side of the design. There we go. And pull that through. Don't worry about getting it too tight at the beginning. Sometimes it's easier to do a few stitches first and then pull it tight. I'm putting my needle under the next thread to the left. You can work whichever direction you want. For me, I work right to left. So I'm going to go to the thread on the corresponding side of the other side and pull my thread through. Now we're catching just the threads. We're not catching any fabric at all. And all we're doing, nothing complicated, we're just going thread on one side of the fabric through the thread on the other piece of fabric and pulling it through. Let's see if I can get a closer picture there for you. Under that one, under that one. So you can see this is not a difficult process, but it can take some time. This is called a whip stitch. We're just going to go all the way around the design and it helps to kind of hold this together as you're stitching. So I'm holding it together with my 2 fingers on the left hand while I am using my right hand to go under the threads. Don't have fantastic lighting right here, sorry. There we go. We're just going to continue all the way around until we get to close to this corner, and then I want to show you how to deal with the corner. Okay, as you can see, we have stitched from that first corner and we're approaching our second corner here. So what we want to do is turn it over, take that corner point on the bottom piece, fold it down just like we did at the beginning, and then fold our seam allowance down. When we flip that over, we're going to hold it in place. We can see that our corner is matching up perfectly with the center mark we put on our fabric, so that's great. Now we're just going to continue. We're going to pick up 1 thread on one side, 1 thread on the other, and we're going to stitch to the corner. And then we're going to turn the corner. Let's just get to the corner first. 1 stitch on one side, 1 stitch on the other side, 1 thread on each side. There we go. Okay, we're at the corner. Now we're going to turn under the other side. There's that mitered corner like we had before. We're going to hold these together, some excess thread there. And we're just going to keep stitching. 1 thread on one side, 1 thread on the other side. That's all it is, but it gets a little weird here because we're turning the corner. So don't worry about it, just keep doing 1 thread for 1 thread. You don't have to pull it real tight when you do it. We'll tighten it up in a little bit as we get around the corner. 1 thread on this side, and the matching thread on the other side. I'm going to do about 3 stitches before I tighten. 1 on this side, and 1 on this side. Just the threads being stubborn. Okay, now I can pull a little bit tighter, and we can see I've turned the corner. Now I'm going to do just like I did before. I'm going to hold the sides together. And keep stitching. Let's do a couple more so we can see what that corner actually looks like. And you can see we'll have a nice point there, and we'll have turned the corner and I'm working on the straight side again. I find that it's easier to do them loosely, do like about 3 loose stitches on that corner before you pull it tight, because it is kind of hard to turn the corner sometimes. So there you go. We have our corner. There's our first corner. There's our second corner. And we're just going to keep going. Now we're on the straight edge again, the easy part. We're going to stitch the straight edge again until we get to this corner. And we're going to do exactly the same thing we did on that last one. And then we're just going to keep going around until we've got a good portion left to leave room for stuffing. I'm going to come back when I'm at that stage so you can see what that looks like, and I'll show you how to stuff it, how to finish it up, how to put the button on, and then that's it. We're done. I'll be back in a bit. Okay, I have stitched around most of my design and left just a small portion open for stuffing. I like to catch the start of one corner before stopping so that it's easier to finish up. What we're going to do is we're going to take our polyester fiber fill, and what you do is you break it up into pieces, break the fibers up, and then you just start stuffing. We're going to stuff as much as we can, but then we're going to stitch a little bit more, and then at the very end we're going to stuff the rest of it so that it's nice and full. And when you're using the polyester fiber fill, you do need to break it up into pieces, break the fibers down a little bit so it doesn't clump. Poke it into the corners. I'm always so impressed at how well these turn out. They're just so pretty, and you look at it and you wonder how you possibly put this together, but it's not that hard at all. You just take your time with them, and they're so much fun to do. Once you do one, you're going to want to do a whole bunch of them. And they come in all different sizes. You can do small ones, you can do big ones. Just have a lot of fun with them. Just going to stuff this up and get all this in here, and then we're going to finish stitching. We're going to do another corner, and then we're going to stuff some more before we do the final finish. Okay, I think that's enough for now. I did have to change my thread, and I said I like to do it with just one strand of thread, but my thread broke. Not a problem. You just finish it off like you would any other project. I did a loop finish, and then I ran my needle underneath to lock in the threads, and then I started again with the loop stitch on the back side of the fabric and brought it to the front so that I could stitching. It's pretty seamless. What I have discovered is when the start is the hardest part of these, and when you start stitching it, it gets much easier. The sides seem to match up better, and I don't know if you just get better at it or it just gets a lot easier because the shape is forming. When you first start forming the shape, it's a little awkward. But as long as you keep in mind you're just doing one thread on each side, just matching them up, it's easy to do. Take your time, put some relaxing music on, your favorite movie, whatever. I'm going to stitch a little bit more here, and then we will stuff it some more. Then we'll close it up, and we will put the button on, and then we'll be done. I hope you try one of these. The first time I finished one, I was like so impressed that I made this thing with this fantastic shape. Who would have thought? Okay, I'm going to stitch till this corner, and then I'm going to come back, stuff it some more, and then we'll finish it up. Okay, I have stitched to the next corner, stuffed it more, and now I'm just finishing up the last little bit here. Let's get these last few stitches in, and then we can do our buttons, and we will be done. Just finish up real quickly here. I'll show you how to finish off your thread and bury it in the design so that you don't have a visible knot or ending. Couple more stitches. And we are way back to where we started, the very beginning. There we go. Okay, that is done. So what I'm going to do is go through my last stitch and just do a little loop through my thread. Then I'm going to take my needle and run it through the design, pull it through, pull it a little snug, and then cut the thread, and that will bury the thread inside. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is put the button on. Okay, to put the button on, I have threaded a sewing needle with regular sewing floss that's going to match my buttons, and I'm going to use these peppermint buttons. I have I have it on the needle with the loop method. So what I'm going to do is go to the bottom of my design near that center thread that I marked and just take a tiny little stitch here and attach my thread with the loop. Now it's in the center of the design, and I'm going to take my needle and run it through the Biscornu up to the top, aiming for the center of the design where I have the mark. I'm going to pull it through. Then I'm going to take my button. I'm going to put the needle through the button, both holes. And you can place it in the center, kind of eyeball where you want it. Have it face whatever direction you want. And then you're going to run your needle back through the bottom, squish the Biscornu together to get it back through the back side near that beginning stitch. Now we're going to take the other button and do the same thing on the back. See if that looks like it's in the center. Put it through that side of the needle. Now we're going to try to get it through to the front side again and through the holes of the button again. There we go. Squish it together a little bit. Get it through the other side and back to the back side again. And poke around till we find those holes. There we go. Pull it as tight as you want it to be to squish up your Biscornu. I think I like that. Then I'm going to put it through this hole, but I'm going to just take a little stitch with this one underneath. There you go. Pull it tight till it's where I want it to be. And now I'm going to take my thread and go around the button 3 or 4 times. And then I'm going to loop through here. And then I'm going to run my needle through the bottom. Once we do that, we can cut the thread. And our Biscornu is done. The button's attached. And we're all set. And here's our finished Biscornu. I hope you try one. They sure are a lot of fun. They're very impressive looking, not hard to make at all. I hope that my instructions helped make it look a little bit easier and not so scary. Give one a try and let me know in the comment section below what you think. I love to hear from you. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on anything. We'll see you again soon.